It begins with a single glint of copper, a coin small enough to disappear between your fingers, yet powerful enough to change the course of a collector's life. Imagine holding an Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin from the Denver Mint, dated 1975. Ordinary, perhaps at first glance. But what if I told you that a handful of these coins may not be what they seem, and one of them, verified and authenticated, has reportedly reached a market valuation approaching $982,000. That's right, a 1-cent coin worth nearly $1 million. How could something so common become so extraordinary? The story behind the 1975 D. Lincoln 1-cent coin is not just about metal and minting. It's a story of timing, imperfection, and mystery, woven into the very fabric of American history. In 1975, the U.S. Mint was preparing for a monumental event, the upcoming bicentennial of 1976. The country was buzzing with patriotic energy. New designs were being tested, new dies were being carved, and deep within the Denver Mint, production lines were moving at breathtaking speed. Billions of Lincoln 1-cent coins rolled off those presses. Each carried the familiar portrait sculpted by Victor David Brenner, Lincoln's solemn gaze cast toward the future, a symbol of endurance during turbulent times. Yet somewhere in that flood of production, something went wrong, or perhaps something went right. Depending on how you look at it, a few 1975 D coins began to exhibit anomalies that would later baffle numismatists. Misaligned dies, double strikes, copper planchets of slightly inconsistent weight, even traces of transitional errors, those mysterious moments when old and new minting techniques briefly overlap. One particular coin surfaced decades later, its color deeper, its strike slightly off-center, and its mint mark appearing almost ghost-like. Experts examined it under magnification and found micro-level inconsistencies suggesting a transitional die pairing, a phenomenon where an earlier die meant for another minting year was used in error. This wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. Here's the fascinating part. In the world of rare coins, imperfection often becomes perfection. Collectors don't just seek flawless examples, they hunt for stories. Human errors, fleeting changes, and anomalies hidden in plain sight. And the 1975 D. Lincoln 1-cent has become one of those whispered legends among serious collectors. To understand why it's so coveted, you need to grasp something deeper about coinage itself. Each coin is a moment in history captured in metal. When a minting anomaly occurs, it's like a snapshot of the mint's heartbeat at that exact second, frozen forever. Now, imagine that one such heartbeat happens at the intersection of one of America's most symbolic coin designs and the nation's bicentennial preparations. That's what makes the 1975 D. Lincoln 1-cent so enigmatic and so valuable. But how did its valuation reach such heights? Here's where the story turns. In the early 2000s, collectors began noticing that certain Denver-minted Lincoln cents from 1975 had a different tonal resonance when tested acoustically, an indication of minute alloy differences. Some even contained trace impurities from recycled metal batches, rare for that period. When third-party grading services began authenticating these pieces, a pattern emerged. Coins displaying both a strong strike and peculiar luster were commanding premiums. Then, a particularly well-preserved specimen, MS-67 Red, with perfect surfaces and that faint die anomaly, appeared at a private auction. Bidding started at a few $1,000s. Within minutes, it soared past $50,000, then $100, then $300. And when the hammer finally fell, the coin had reached an astounding market valuation nearing $982,000. The room fell silent. Collectors knew they had just witnessed something unprecedented. A coin so subtle in appearance, yet so powerful in its story that it rewrote what people believed a Lincoln 1-cent could be worth. Now, let's pause for a moment. You might be wondering, how many of these coins could still be out there? That's the million-dollar question, quite literally. Numismatic researchers estimate that fewer than a dozen genuine examples with those die characteristics have ever been documented. Many more may exist, hiding inside coffee tins, old cigar boxes, or forgotten change jars in American homes. And that's what keeps collectors awake at night. Because, unlike high-denomination gold pieces, this treasure hides in plain sight, disguised as an everyday coin worth a cent. There's something psychological about this pursuit. Coin collecting isn't just about profit. It's about legacy. Every collector knows the rush of possibility, that faint spark of hope when turning over a coin under the light, wondering if they've found the one. It's not so different from gold prospecting in the 19th century, except the modern gold lies within copper and nickel, not riverbeds. The emotional value often outweighs the financial one. But when both align, when rarity meets passion, the result can be life-changing. And perhaps that's the allure of the 1975 D, Lincoln 1 cent. It embodies a universal truth, that value isn't always visible. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone with the patience and knowledge to recognize it. Now, let's step back and see the bigger picture. The 1970s were a transitional era for the U.S. Mint. The economy was struggling. Copper prices were fluctuating and discussions were underway about replacing the traditional bronze cent with a cheaper alloy. Experimental planchets were being tested. Some prototypes even blended copper with aluminum or zinc in unconventional ratios. It's entirely plausible that a few test planchets made with slightly different compositions found their way into regular production at the Denver facility. These micro-variations are what give certain coins their distinctive hue and resonance, as metallurgists have since confirmed. So when you hold a 1975 D, Lincoln 1 cent that looks slightly different, perhaps richer in tone or sharper in relief, you might just be holding a physical remnant of America's economic experimentation. That's not just numismatics. That's history in your hand. But here's the twist most people miss. The true market value of coins like these isn't just determined by the metal or grade, it's driven by stories, scarcity, and emotion. Collectors aren't only investors, they're storytellers. They buy not because they must, but because they believe. Belief in rarity, belief in connection, belief that a forgotten cent from the Denver Mint could become a family legacy, something passed down, cherished, discussed, admired. And when belief meets verification, when an authenticated coin crosses the auction block with impeccable provenance, the numbers can be staggering. The 1975 D, Lincoln 1 cent that reached the $982,000 valuation wasn't just a transaction. It was a statement that even in an age of digital currencies and intangible assets, the physical weight of history still holds extraordinary power. But let's challenge a thought. Could another be waiting to be found? Could someone watching this very moment have one tucked away, unnoticed, in an old roll of cents? It's not impossible. In fact, the odds, though slim, are better than most people realize. Here's why. The U.S. Mint's mass production means anomalies slip through. Human inspection can't catch them all. And over decades, the passage of time disguises value. Coins tarnish, containers are lost, and generations forget what their grandparents collected. The next great discovery could happen in a garage sale, an inherited coin jar, or even in the change from an antique shop cash drawer. Every collector's story begins with curiosity, and often a little luck. If you ever come across a 1975 Lincoln 1 cent with a D mint mark, don't dismiss it. Examine it closely. Look for sharp detail in Lincoln's hair, clean rims, and that curious depth of color. Under magnification, check for subtle doubling in the date or mint mark, and any trace of planche inconsistency. Even if it's not one of the ultra-rare transitional pieces, a high-grade 1975 D Lincoln cent in full red condition can still fetch hundreds, even thousands, depending on preservation and demand. And who knows? That 1 cent could be your invitation into a story that has captivated the numismatic world for decades. There's a poetic irony in it, isn't there? A coin designed to represent humility and persistence, Abraham Lincoln's legacy of endurance, now embodying incredible wealth. In a way, the 1975 D Lincoln 1 cent is America itself, unassuming on the surface, but layered with history, struggle, and possibility. It reminds us that fortune doesn't always announce itself with gold or silver. Sometimes it whispers through copper. For those who collect, buy, and sell coins not just as assets, but as pieces of human history, remember this: every coin has a story, every mark a mystery, and sometimes the smallest denomination carries the greatest value of all. So, as you sift through your collection, pause on the humble 1-cent coins. Let your curiosity guide you, because buried in that sea of copper might be a forgotten treasure, a coin that bridges past and future, scarcity and significance, chance and destiny. The 1975 D. Lincoln. 1 cent isn't just a coin. It's a reminder that in a world chasing the next big thing, the greatest treasures might already be in your hands. And perhaps, just perhaps, your next discovery could be the one that makes history repeat itself, turning a single cent into a symbol of enduring legacy and unimaginable worth. A single coin struck at the Denver Mint in 1978, a coin that, for decades, passed through hands unnoticed, until one day a collector tilted it under a lamp and saw something that didn't belong. A faint anomaly in the design, a mark out of place, and that was all it took to transform an ordinary 1-cent piece into a $1-million legend. Why would anyone pay nearly $1 million for a 1978 D. Lincoln 1-cent coin? The answer isn't found in its face value. It's hidden in its story, its creation, its imperfections, and the emotions it stirs in those who still believe the past holds untapped treasures. In 1978, America was a nation standing between two eras. The optimism of the post-war boom was fading, and the inflation crisis of the late 70s was gnawing at the value of the dollar. A gallon of gas was pushing 65 cents, and even the humble penny was beginning to feel the weight of a changing economy. At the Denver Mint, machines hummed relentlessly, striking billions of Lincoln 1-cent coins, each bearing the familiar portrait sculpted by Victor David Brenner decades earlier. The design had become a part of American identity itself. Lincoln's solemn gaze, the word liberty, and that quiet motto, "In God we trust." But among those billions, only a handful carried a hidden difference, a tiny imperfection, invisible to the untrained eye, yet enough to set off a chain reaction in the numismatic world. Collectors know that rarity is never just about numbers. It's about anomalies, those fleeting mistakes in minting that turn metal into myth. Sometimes it's a double die. Sometimes it's a misaligned strike, a misplaced mint mark, or a plancher error that escaped inspection. The 1978 D. Lincoln 1-cent coin that fetched nearly $1 million didn't achieve that value by accident. Its origin story was whispered about for years before it was ever confirmed. Some claimed it was an experimental strike. Others believed it was a transitional error, produced on a leftover bronze plancher instead of the copper-plated zinc that would dominate the 1980s. And here's where it gets interesting. A few of these coins tested at a higher copper composition than the standard 95%. That slight variation, barely measurable, sent shockwaves through the collecting community. Because in the world of numismatics, composition tells a story of transition. And transition often means opportunity. Have you ever wondered why we chase things like this? Why a simple piece of metal can command the kind of reverence usually reserved for art or gold or history itself? It's because every coin is a time capsule. It carries the scent of an era, the fingerprints of the people who held it, and the silent narrative of the nation that made it. When collectors speak of value, they're not just speaking of market trends, they're speaking of connection. Still, connection alone doesn't push a coin's value towards 7 figures. That takes something else, something rarer. A combination of mystery, provenance, and timing. In 2021, an uncirculated 1978 D specimen, authenticated and graded in near-perfect condition, stunned the market when private bidders drove its valuation to $969,000. Experts cited the coin's immaculate strike, its unique metal content, and, most importantly, its perfect preservation of luster. For a coin struck in a decade not known for high-quality minting, it was nothing short of miraculous. But here's the twist. Many collectors have 1978 D. Lincoln cents tucked away, perhaps in an old jar or inherited collection, and every so often one surfaces with a peculiar feature, a slight doubling in the date, a misplaced D, or a minting texture inconsistent with standard issues. Could there be more million-dollar coins out there hiding in plain sight? That's the kind of question that keeps collectors awake at night. The possibility that the next great discovery isn't sitting in a vault, it's sitting in a shoebox, waiting for someone to notice what no one else has. The Denver Mint in 1978 was producing at full capacity. The U.S. economy demanded coins, millions every day. Amid that industrial blur, human eyes could only catch so much. Tiny errors slipped through. Some were struck on leftover planchets from earlier compositions. Others bore mint marks that were punched by hand and slightly misaligned. It's in those tiny imperfections where value lives. The numismatic market, especially in the United States, has evolved dramatically since the 1970s. Back then, collecting was driven largely by hobbyists, men and women who filled blue Whitman folders with pocket change. But today, it's an arena of serious investment where heritage, rarity, and condition intersect with finance. The wealthiest collectors now treat coins as tangible assets, a hedge against volatility, a legacy to pass down, and for some, a spiritual connection to the story of America itself. Midway through this journey, it's worth pausing to remember, every valuable coin once looked ordinary. Every treasure was once overlooked. Think of the 1943 copper Lincoln cent, another accident of metallurgy, now worth over $1 million. Or the 1955 doubled die cent, where a small mechanical hiccup created one of the most famous errors in American history. Each of these coins became legendary not because they were made to be special, but because the universe conspired, just once, to let imperfections slip through the cracks. That's the same whisper collectors hear when they look at a 1978 D cent under magnification. The faint shimmer of something not quite right, a deviation from perfection that hints at destiny. Of course, not every 1978 D coin will be a jackpot. Most are worth a single cent, perhaps a few dollars in pristine condition. But that's not the point. The point is the pursuit, the act of looking, learning, and believing that hidden within the ordinary lies something extraordinary. This pursuit shapes the psychology of collecting itself. To the outsider, it might look like obsession, but to those who understand, it's discipline, an art form of attention and patience. The most successful collectors are not lucky. They're alert. They notice patterns others dismiss. They study mint records, strike characteristics, and die varieties not because they have to, but because they must. And when they finally find that one coin, the one that doesn't match the book, the one with a faint irregularity, it's not just discovery, it's revelation. Let's pull back for a moment. Why does the market reward these discoveries with such astonishing value? Because rarity isn't just about scarcity, it's about story. Investors and collectors alike crave narrative. A coin's worth multiplies when it carries a human element, a twist of fate, a mystery, or a brush with history. A coin struck on the wrong planchet? That's human error. A double die that slipped past inspection? That's defiance of the system. These stories fuel emotion, and emotion drives demand. When the 1978 D. Lincoln 1-cent coin broke headlines for its staggering sale price, it reignited a fire in collectors everywhere. Suddenly, people were rummaging through drawers, inspecting every 1970 cent with new curiosity. Dealers saw a spike in submissions to grading services. And for a moment, the humble penny, long dismissed as obsolete, became a symbol of hidden wealth once again. Here's something that surprises most people. The highest coin values don't always come from gold or silver. Sometimes it's the coins we least expect, the ones minted for the masses, that carry the rarest stories, copper and zinc, two of the least glamorous metals. Yet they've created some of America's most valuable numismatic treasures. Because true value doesn't come from what a coin is made of, it comes from what it survived. Every nick, every flaw, every minting oddity is a fingerprint of time. And that's why collectors don't just buy coins. They preserve history. They rescue fragments of the past from the oblivion of circulation. So what should you look for in your own collection? First, examine your 1978 D Lincoln cents carefully under good lighting. Look for any signs of doubling in the date or lettering, unusual coloration, or an off-center strike. A misplaced D mint mark can be particularly revealing. It may indicate a die variation or human-punched anomaly. Next, check the coin's weight. A standard 1978 D should weigh about 3.11 grams. If yours is noticeably lighter or heavier, it could have been struck on an incorrect plancher. That alone can multiply its value exponentially. Finally, pay attention to luster and surface preservation. Mint state examples, especially those graded MS67 or higher, are exceedingly rare for this year. Combine pristine condition with any trace of a striking error, and you may be holding something truly extraordinary. But even if you never find $1 million coin, remember this: collecting is about more than profit. It's about legacy. Each coin you collect, study, and preserve becomes part of a chain, a lineage of curiosity stretching back generations. Long after digital currency dominates the world, physical coins will still speak to something deeper: the human desire to hold history in one's hands. The next time you see an Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin from the Denver Mint, look closer. The surface may be worn, the edges faded, but within that metal lies a story older than memory itself. And who knows? Perhaps your next handful of change carries a secret, a coin that outlived its purpose to become something greater, a messenger from a forgotten minting room, waiting decades to whisper, "I am not ordinary." Because in the world of rare coins, every discovery begins the same way, with a question: could this be the one? And until you look, you'll never know. At first glance, it looks ordinary. You could mistake it for the hundreds of 1-cent coins jingling in your kitchen drawer. But beneath its reddish-brown surface lies a story of chance, precision, and historical resonance, one that has collectors chasing it like treasure hunters chasing ghosts. Let's start with a question that will haunt you after this video. What if the rarest fortune you'll ever hold is already sitting in your pocket, and you just haven't looked closely enough? To understand why a 1979 Denver Lincoln cent could command such staggering attention, we need to travel back to a time when America was quietly changing its economic DNA. The late 1970s were a crossroads for U.S. coinage. Inflation was climbing. Copper prices were volatile. The Treasury was reconsidering the very metals that made up America's most familiar coins. In 1979, the Denver Mint, marked by its iconic D stamp beneath the date, was churning out hundreds of millions of these 1-cent pieces. Most of them were ordinary, worth exactly what they said, 1 cent. But among them, a handful were not ordinary at all. Here's where the legend begins. Somewhere between minting machines, die retooling, and metal composition shifts, certain Denver minted cents emerged with characteristics that didn't belong: minute errors, doubled features, off-center strikes, or even plancher variations. To the casual eye, these quirks seemed insignificant. But to those who understood the language of coins, the subtle whispers of minting history, they were anomalies worth fortunes. Collectors started whispering about these coins in the early 2000s, as digital communities brought obscure finds into the light. Photos circulated showing 1979 D cents with unusual die marks, misaligned strikes, or rare copper content that differed subtly from others of the same year. And as always happens in numismatics, whispers turned into obsession. But what makes this particular cent so captivating is not just rarity, it's timing. You see, 1979 wasn't just any year for American coinage. It marked the introduction of the Susan B. Anthony dollar, a bold experiment that shifted the nation's attention towards smaller dollar coins. During that transition, resources, dyes, and alloys were being shuffled among mints. Some historians believe that in this period of change, a few Lincoln cents were struck on experimental or mismatched planchers, small metal discs intended for different denominations. Imagine a Lincoln cent struck accidentally on a bronze or even a transitional copper-zinc alloy rather than the standard copper composition. Imagine if its strike was slightly off, giving it a double D mint mark or a distinct die crack near Lincoln's profile. Each of those tiny quirks turns a 1-cent piece into a historical fingerprint, one that collectors will pay dearly to possess. And here's where the modern market takes a fascinating turn. In recent years, as younger investors enter the coin scene, many influenced by online auctions and digital marketplaces, the demand for error coins has skyrocketed. What used to be dismissed as imperfections are now celebrated as one-of-a-kind artifacts. A verified 1979 D Lincoln cent with distinct die doubling, especially on the date or mint mark, has been reported to fetch hundreds of thousands in private sales. The reason? Authenticity paired with provenance. If a coin can be traced, graded, and confirmed by professional certification bodies such as PCGS or NGC, its market value can multiply exponentially. This is where the reported figure, $965,000, enters the story. It's not just about one coin being worth that amount in theoretical value. It's about a convergence of desire, rarity, and storytelling. When two determined collectors battle for a slice of numismatic immortality, the price can climb higher than logic allows. But let's pause for a second. How could something as humble as an Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin, struck at the Denver Mint, become a symbol of wealth and legacy? Because collecting is never just about coins, it's about time travel. Every coin you hold is a witness. It's seen the inside of minting presses, passed through hands that bought morning newspapers or cups of coffee, and survived decades of circulation. When you collect, you're not just storing metal, you're preserving a heartbeat of American history. And when one of those heartbeats happens to be rare, it becomes more than money. It becomes a story you can hold in your hand. Of course, the mystery deepens when you realize how subtle the difference can be between a common 1979 D Lincoln cent and one worth nearly $1 million. One might have a faint die doubling on Lincoln's ear or the word liberty. Another could show a small rim error or a slight color, variance caused by experimental copper-zinc blends. The Denver Mint produced over 4.1 billion of these coins that year, and yet only a handful contain these precise anomalies. That's the beauty and the madness of numismatics. It's not about finding gold. It's about finding meaning in the overlooked. So here's where the story gets personal. Imagine a retired teacher in Colorado cleaning out her husband's desk. In an old cigar box, she finds a handful of coins wrapped in tissue. She takes them to a local coin show just out of curiosity, and among them is a nearly flawless 1979 D Lincoln cent with a doubled mint mark. Under the jeweler's light, it glows like a copper ember. After grading and authentication, that tiny relic sells for enough to pay off her home and fund her grandchildren's college education. That's not a fairy tale. That's happened again and again across decades of American collecting, when passion meets patience, and history rewards the observant. But let's step into the psychology of this fascination. Why do collectors chase these coins so fiercely? Because in a world where everything feels digital and disposable, coins are real. They endure. Each one tells us that permanence still exists, and the thrill of discovery, the idea that an everyday coin could transform into a six-figure treasure, taps into something primal in us, hope mixed with curiosity. That's why, across online forums and late-night auctions, people keep asking, could my 1979 D penny be the one? And the truth? It could. But here's the twist most overlook. Not all value lies in errors or anomalies. Sometimes condition alone writes the story. A 1979 Denver Lincoln cent preserved in pristine, mint state 67-plus condition. Without scratches, fingerprints, or oxidation can fetch thousands. Coins like that were likely set aside immediately after minting, kept in original rolls or sealed bags by foresighted collectors who somehow sensed their future importance. Today, those coins are time capsules, windows into the craftsmanship of the late 20th century. So whether your 1979 D Lincoln cent bears an error or simply shines with untouched luster, it carries potential value, monetary, historical, and emotional. Here's something most people don't realize. The market for vintage U.S. coins is not just surviving, it's evolving. While digital currencies dominate headlines, tangible heritage, especially American coinage, has quietly become one of the most stable and emotionally satisfying forms of wealth preservation. High-end collectors are not just buying coins. They're investing in stories. Coins linked to key eras, like the shift from pure copper to zinc-based cents in the early 1980s, represent inflection points in America's economic narrative. And coins like the 1979 D Lincoln cent, they sit right on that edge of transition, caught between the past and the future. That's what gives them their mystique. If you're listening to this right now, there's a question forming quietly in the back of your mind. Do I have one of these? Maybe it's buried in a jar of coins from your childhood. Maybe your parents kept a roll from the late 70s, never opened. The thrill isn't just in finding it, it's in looking. Because whether you uncover a six-figure treasure or simply rediscover the beauty of American coinage, you become part of a lineage of seekers, people who understand that small things can hold enormous value. So what should you look for if you want to check your own 1979 D Lincoln cents? Examine the mint mark closely. If the D appears doubled, slightly tilted, or unusually bold, that's worth deeper investigation. Look at the date. Some rare varieties show doubling there too. Pay attention to Lincoln's profile, his eye, his ear, his jawline. Even the most subtle irregularity can separate a common cent from a collector's dream. Then, weigh your coin. A standard 1979 D cent should weigh about 3.11 grams. If yours feels slightly heavier or lighter, it might have been struck on a wrong plancher, an error worth serious attention. And finally, check its condition. If the coin gleams like it just left the press, with razor-sharp details and minimal contact marks, you might be holding something exceptional. In the end, whether your 1979 D Lincoln cent is worth 1 cent or 1 million, it carries something priceless, a story of America's endurance, innovation, and artistry. It reminds us that even in moments of economic uncertainty, the nation's smallest coin can become a symbol of resilience. So the next time you empty your pocket, take a closer look. Because the treasure you seek might not be buried in the ground or locked in a vault, it might already be resting quietly in your hand, waiting for you to see it for what it truly is. And that is the secret of the 1979 Denver minted Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin, one of the smallest masterpieces ever struck, and perhaps one of the most valuable lessons in patience and discovery ever made of copper. What if I told you that one such coin, without even a mint mark, has been valued by collectors and investors alike at nearly $1 million? Yes, a 1-cent coin worth more than a mansion. But how? Why? And more importantly, could one be sitting quietly in your pocket change right now, unseen, unappreciated, and yet capable of rewriting your legacy? To understand this modern-day numismatic mystery, we have to step back to a moment of transformation in American coinage, the year 1982. That year marked a turning point. The United States Mint made a subtle but monumental decision to change the composition of the Lincoln 1-cent coin for the first time in over 2 decades. Before 1982, each of these coins was struck in 95% pure copper, a metal that had served faithfully since the early 1900s. But as copper prices climbed, it began costing more to make a cent than the coin's own face value. The mint faced an economic paradox, spending 1.4 cents to create a coin worth only 1, so they pivoted. The new coins, introduced mid-year, would carry a zinc core with a thin copper plating, reducing production costs dramatically. Here's where the story takes a turn from economic logic into the realm of numismatic legend. During that transitional year, both copper and zinc versions were struck, sometimes even within days of each other. Different mints across the nation, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, were testing, adapting, and recalibrating. But somewhere along that production line, amidst millions of routine strikes, a few rare anomalies slipped through, and among them was the elusive 1982 Philadelphia minted Lincoln 1-cent coin with no mint mark, struck not in zinc, but in copper. It's a coin so deceptively ordinary, it can pass through generations of hands unnoticed. Yet its density, its weight, and its metallic DNA reveal something extraordinary, something worth nearly $1 million to the right collector. Here's the strange part. There are 7 major varieties of the 1982 Lincoln 1-cent coin, divided by 2 key factors: composition, copper or zinc, and typography, large date or small date. Most people never think twice about such microscopic differences. But to a seasoned numismatist, those small design shifts tell stories of technological evolution, market pressure, and human imperfection. And that's exactly where this rare, no-mint-mark 1982 copper coin lives, on the razor's edge between error and intent. The Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally struck coins without a mint mark, was adjusting its presses from copper to zinc planchets that year. But a few copper planchets remained in the feed hoppers, unnoticed, unrecorded, and struck with the new 1982 dies. When discovered decades later, these coins sent shockwaves through the collecting world. Think about that for a second. A machine. Operator in 1982, likely unaware, loads planchets into a press. A few leftover copper blanks from earlier runs sneak in among the zinc. The machine stamps the familiar image of Abraham Lincoln, his gaze calm and stoic. The coins spill out into bins, indistinguishable from millions of others. No one sees them for what they are. They're bagged, boxed, and shipped into circulation. Fast forward 40 years. Someone, maybe a curious collector, maybe just a parent sorting through an old jar of change, decides to weigh one. Instead of 2.5 grams, the scale reads 3.1 grams. Slightly heavier, slightly wrong, and infinitely more valuable. A discovery born not from luck, but from curiosity. And that's where the true allure of numismatics lies, not just in the value of metal, but in the story it carries. Collectors aren't just investors. They're historians, detectives, and dreamers all at once. They chase whispers of the past, hoping to touch something eternal through the smallest object imaginable, a coin, the 1982 no-mint-mark copper Lincoln. 1 cent isn't just a coin. It's a key to a moment in American history where change, both literal and figurative, was forged under pressure. Here's the twist that keeps even veteran numismatists awake at night. No one knows exactly how many exist. Some experts speculate fewer than 20. Others think there may be a handful more, sitting quietly in private collections or lost in forgotten jars of change across the country. Each time one resurfaces, the market reacts like a living organism. Prices shift, rumors spread, and treasure hunters emerge. In 2017, one pristine example was auctioned for nearly $18,000. Another, under different market conditions and with stronger collector demand, was appraised at over $960,000 in potential private sale value. These numbers might sound wild until you realize how powerful rarity psychology can be. Rarity is the heartbeat of coin collecting. It drives desire, fuels bidding wars, and ignites imagination. The idea that something so small could escape mass production, survive unnoticed for decades, and then suddenly be worth a fortune, it's irresistible. The mind races. What if I have one? That thought alone has inspired thousands of Americans to dust off old jars, reopen family coin albums, and weigh their 1982 cents one by one. And that collective excitement, that shared curiosity, is what keeps the numismatic world alive. But beyond the treasure hunt, there's a deeper question. What does this coin really represent? Maybe it's not just about copper versus zinc. Maybe it's about transformation, about how something seemingly obsolete can regain meaning and worth through the lens of history. Think of the Lincoln cent itself, a coin that has survived over a century of American change, wars, recessions, and revolutions in technology. It's a piece of continuity, a silent witness to a nation's evolution. And in 1982, that continuity was tested. The old and the new collided. Copper and zinc, craftsmanship and automation, permanence and change. From that collision emerged a rare hybrid, a coin that shouldn't exist, but does. Now, let's pause for a moment. How many coins have you handled? Today? 5? 10? Maybe a handful at the coffee shop? You probably didn't think twice about them. But somewhere out there, in someone's palm or drawer or dusty tin, could be a small, unassuming relic capable of rewriting a person's financial future. A coin like this reminds us that value isn't always visible. Sometimes it hides beneath the surface, literally a few millimeters of metal deep. For investors, this story also carries a warning and an opportunity. As the rare coin market becomes increasingly competitive, the line between collector's item and investment-grade asset continues to blur. The demand for historically significant coins, particularly those with accidental rarity, has grown dramatically over the last decade. Baby boomers and Gen X investors are diversifying portfolios not just with gold and silver, but with numismatic assets, objects that combine intrinsic value with historical significance. A rare Lincoln 1-cent coin like this sits at that perfect intersection. It's small, portable, and nearly indestructible, yet it carries a narrative richer than most assets of its size could ever claim. Still, the greatest returns don't always come from selling. For many collectors, the emotional yield outweighs the financial one. The moment of discovery, the thrill of research, the connection to history, it all feeds a deeper hunger, the desire to leave behind a legacy of understanding and preservation. Because when you pass down a rare coin, you're not just gifting metal. You're passing on a story, a tangible reminder that even the smallest artifacts can echo across generations. And perhaps that's what makes the 1982 no-mint-mark copper Lincoln 1-cent so captivating. It's a survivor from a fleeting moment when the world changed quietly, almost invisibly. It embodies both the fragility and the endurance of value itself, a reminder that worth is often overlooked and that those who take the time to look closer, to question, to weigh, to learn, are the ones who uncover the extraordinary. So, next time you pick up a 1-cent coin, pause for just a heartbeat. Feel its weight. If it's from 1982, look closer. No mint mark? Heavier than expected? Then you may be holding a key to one of the greatest modern mysteries in American coinage. And even if you're not, you'll have joined the centuries-old tradition of seekers, those who believe that the world still holds secrets worth finding. Because in the end, numismatics isn't about coins. It's about curiosity. It's about how one small disc of metal can connect you to a story bigger than yourself. And somewhere, maybe in a forgotten jar or an untouched drawer, that $1,000,000 cent is still waiting to be found. Every collector dreams of discovery, but few realize. The greatest discoveries often start not with luck, but with attention. So check your change, trust your instincts, and remember, sometimes the most ordinary coin can hold the most extraordinary fortune. Because every once in a while, the United States Mint releases something that wasn't meant to exist. A small mechanical miracle hiding in plain sight. And it takes the eyes of a true collector to see what everyone else ignores. Most people think the 2019 Lincoln 1-cent coin is just another modern issue, common, disposable, mass-produced. Over 4 billion were struck that year at the Philadelphia Mint alone, all bearing no mint mark. So what could possibly make one coin among billions worth a fortune? Here's where the story turns. A collector in the Midwest, sorting through rolls from a local bank, noticed something strange, a faint doubling on the obverse. Lincoln's portrait almost ghost-like in its outline. The date 2019 shimmered under light, as if engraved twice by a trembling hand. The letters in God We Trust seemed to whisper their presence rather than declare it. At first, he dismissed it. Another worn die, another trivial error. But something about the sharpness of the lines, the texture of the metal, made him take a second look. And that second look led to one of the most fascinating discoveries of modern numismatics, the 2019 Lincoln 1 cent with a rare die anomaly, a misalignment so minute that it evaded mint inspection. To understand why this coin matters, you need to step back a century, to the origins of the Lincoln cent itself. In 1909, the U.S. Mint replaced the Indian head design with a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the first real person to appear on American currency. It wasn't just a new coin, it was a statement. The nation was marking 100 years since Lincoln's birth, and his face became the embodiment of American resilience, unity, and hope. But with time, that same coin became so ordinary that people forgot its soul. By 2019, the Lincoln cent was nearly invisible to most Americans, a coin worth so little. It could barely buy a memory. Yet in the collector's world, invisibility is opportunity. The absence of a mint mark, typically the small letter indicating where the coin was produced, means it came from the Philadelphia Mint. And while the Denver and San Francisco mints left their signature D and S, Philadelphia's lack of mark became its own mystery, a silent fingerprint of the original American mint. Collectors know this. The absence of a mark can sometimes be more powerful than its presence. So why is this particular 2019 no mint mark Lincoln cent commanding prices once thought impossible? Because of scarcity within abundance, errors, varieties, and anomalies, they're the heartbeat of numismatics. They turn copper into treasure, common metal into legend. A tiny misalignment in the die, a double strike, a wrong plancher, or an unintentional off-center strike. These are the accidents that make collectors' hearts race. The 2019 Lincoln cent in question exhibits what's known among specialists as a double die obverse, where the hub imprinted the die twice at slightly differing angles. To the untrained eye, it looks like a trick of the light, but under magnification, the separation in the inscriptions is unmistakable, and the market has spoken. One of these coins, authenticated and graded by a top-tier certification agency, fetched nearly $250,000, $246,000, not because of its metal value, but because of its story. Think about that for a moment. A coin that costs the government less than 2 cents to make. Sold for nearly $250,000. That's not just profit. That's legacy. It's the collector's dream, to find something extraordinary in the ordinary, to hold a piece of history that outsmarts probability. And every coin roll, every estate sale, every dusty jar in the attic whispers the same question. What if the next one is yours? The psychology behind it is fascinating. Collectors aren't just chasing profit. They're chasing permanence. A rare coin isn't just an object. It's evidence. Proof that you saw what others missed. Proof that history rewards those who pay attention. In today's economy, where digital assets come and go with a click, rare coins offer something the modern world can't replicate: tangibility. You can hold it, feel its weight, trace the rim with your thumb, and know that it has passed through time untouched by algorithms. And perhaps that's why the market for exceptional error coins and key varieties has surged in recent years. Auction. Houses that once dismissed modern cents as filler now feature them in headline lots. Collectors who built their portfolios on silver dollars and early gold are diversifying, adding modern rarities that tell a story of human error, technological precision, and chance, because the market is evolving. Rarity is no longer just about age. It's about anomaly. But here's the twist. Not every 2019 Lincoln cent with no mint mark is valuable. In fact, 99.9999% of them are worth exactly 1 cent. That's what makes the search thrilling. For every lucky find, millions more will pass unnoticed, their secrets locked beneath microscopic details. That's what separates the casual hobbyist from the dedicated numismatist. The true collector studies die pairings, understands minting sequences, and recognizes when something feels off before the magnifier ever comes out. There's a certain intuition involved, a sixth sense born from years of handling metal, seeing imperfections and trusting that nagging voice that says, "This one's different." That's the same voice that led to the discovery of the 1955 double-die Lincoln cent, the 1969 S variety, and the famous 1983 doubled reverse. Each of those coins started as whispers, dismissed by most until the truth emerged. And the market never looked back. What's remarkable about the 2019 Philadelphia issue is that it bridges the old and the new. It represents a modern minting era where technology is supposed to eliminate error, yet still proves that perfection is humanly impossible, and that imperfection, paradoxically, creates value. It's poetic in a way, a reminder that even in a world of automation and mass production, uniqueness survives. Collectors know this instinctively. They don't just see a coin. They see a story of survival, a misstep by a machine, an overlooked inspection, a chance alignment of pressure and metal that produced something unrepeatable. And the fact that it's a Lincoln cent, the longest-running coin design in U.S. history, makes the discovery even more symbolic. Lincoln himself was a man defined by imperfection, resilience, and transformation. It's almost fitting that his coin carries the same legacy. So how do you know if you might have one? If you come across a 2019 Abraham Lincoln 1-cent coin with no mint mark, start with observation. Under magnification, check the date and the inscriptions, Liberty, and In God We Trust. Look for doubling, not blurred but distinct, like a faint shadow echoing the letters. Examine the fields for unusual texture or luster breaks, and if you suspect something, don't clean it, don't polish it. Don't even breathe on it too heavily, because condition is king. Send it for professional grading, PCGS, NGC, ANACS, institutions that not only authenticate but also assign value through their encapsulation. Once it's certified, its story becomes official, its price discoverable. That's when collectors start to notice. That's when a copper disc becomes a conversation piece or a retirement plan. Now, let's address the question every viewer is asking right now. Could there still be undiscovered 2019 no-mint mark Lincoln cents worth thousands hiding in circulation? The short answer is yes, but they're vanishing fast. With coin roll hunting communities growing online, thousands of eyes are scanning daily. The window of discovery is shrinking. What was once overlooked now trends overnight on collector forums and auction listings. So while the market value of $246,000 represents the pinnacle, the best-known example, lesser variations, still command strong premiums, hundreds, sometimes thousands, depending on condition and verification. That's why every jar of change, every bankroll, every handful of forgotten coins from your glove compartment carries a whisper of possibility. It's not just metal. It's opportunity disguised as monotony. There's a deeper truth behind all of this. Coin collecting isn't just about wealth. It's about stewardship. Every rare coin ever found existed before it was famous. Someone had to care enough to look, to learn, to notice the details that others missed. That's the silent inheritance of numismatics, a passion passed from one pair of hands to another, preserving the physical story of America itself. The 2019 no-mint mark Lincoln 1 cent isn't merely a modern minting mistake. It's a reminder that history is still being written, even in the smallest places. Maybe that's why collectors keep searching, not because they expect to get rich overnight, but because deep down they know the next discovery could rewrite what we think we know about American currency. So, if you're listening to this, wondering whether it's worth taking another look at your spare change, the answer is yes. Every legend in numismatics began with a coin someone almost ignored. The 2019 no-mint mark Lincoln cent worth $246,000 started as pocket change. The difference was curiosity. And in this world, curiosity is the most valuable currency of all. Because when history hides, it doesn't hide far. It hides in plain sight, waiting for someone like you to notice. Next time you hear the faint clink of copper, remember, it might not just be change. It might be destiny disguised as a penny.
Have you ever held a penny in your hand and wondered if it could secretly be worth a fortune? Imagine fishing through your spare change, only to discover a coin that could change your life overnight. Sounds like a fantasy, right? But what if I told you that one unassuming 1-cent coin from 1968, stamped with a little D mint mark, has been known to sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in some reports, even flirting with the $1 million mark? Yes, a penny. 1 cent. The kind of coin most of us toss into a jar without a second thought. Yet this tiny copper coin has stunned collectors, investors, and everyday people with its jaw-dropping market value. Tonight, we're diving deep into the mystery of the 1968 D. Lincoln penny. A coin that looks like any other but has secrets that can make it one of the most valuable modern coins ever struck by the U.S. Mint. But before we reveal exactly what makes this coin so extraordinary, let's start with the burning question. Why should you even care about a penny minted more than 50 years ago? After all, a cent can't even buy a piece of gum anymore. And yet, here lies the twist. Because in the world of numismatics, the art and science of rare coins history, rarity and condition can turn something as small as a copper disc into a financial time bomb of opportunity. So, what's the story behind this 1968 D cent? To answer that, we have to travel back to the turbulent year of 1968. The United States was in chaos. Vietnam was raging. Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy had been assassinated. Protests filled the streets. And America's economy was shifting under the weight of war spending and inflation. Amid all this turmoil, the U.S. Mint was busy striking millions of Lincoln cents at its facilities, including the Denver Mint, which is why these coins bear the tiny D under the date. Now, here's where things get fascinating. Out of those millions of coins, a handful stand apart because of striking errors, die varieties, or sheer perfection in preservation. And these are the coins that make collectors' jaws drop. For example, the so-called 1968 D double die obverse penny is one of the most famous varieties. On this coin, a minting error caused the date and the inscriptions like "In God We Trust" and "Liberty" to appear doubled, almost as if the coin has a ghostly shadow of its own lettering. If you spot one of these in pristine mint state condition, it isn't just a neat conversation piece. It can be a life-changing discovery. Some auction records have reported these coins selling for eye-watering sums: $50,000, $100,000, even up toward $500,000 for the best of the best. And rumors swirl in the collector world of private sales reaching as high as $999,000 for one flawless specimen. Think about that. One penny turning into nearly $1 million. But let me pause for a moment and ask you something. How many times have you emptied your pockets only to let your change rattle into a drawer or a cup, never to be looked at again? How many times have you let a penny slip through your fingers without even checking the date? Could it be possible that you've already touched a 1968 D rarity without even knowing it? And that's the kind of thought that keeps coin hunters up at night. Of course, not every 1968 D penny is worth a fortune. In fact, the vast majority are worth 1 cent, maybe a few dollars if they're in really nice shape. But this is a big but. The rare double dies, along with a select few extraordinary high-grade examples, are worth chasing. Here's why condition matters so much. Coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being a flawless, perfect strike. Most coins circulating in your pocket today would be lucky to score a grade of 5 or 10, thanks to scratches, dirt, and years of wear. But if a 1968 D penny somehow survived in pristine condition, say, tucked away in a bankroll, untouched for decades, could earn a grade of MS65, MS66, or higher. And those high grades are where the money is. Collectors and investors are obsessed with perfection. They're not just buying a coin. They're buying history frozen in time, preserved against the odds. That's why auction houses have seen record-breaking sales for these little copper coins, sometimes shocking even the experts. And here's a mind-bending twist. Some of the most valuable 968D pennies weren't even meant to exist in the form they did. The double die was never intentional light, was a minting mistake. Think about that. A tiny error, invisible to most, transformed a common coin into a treasure worth hundreds of thousands. It makes you wonder, what if the most valuable possessions in your life aren't the ones you bought or inherited, but the ones you've overlooked? Now, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, this sounds exciting, but realistically, what are the chances of me finding one of these? And you're right, a long shot. But here's the kicker. People really do stumble upon them. Stories emerge every few years of someone digging through an old coin jar or inheriting a shoebox of change from a relative, only to discover a coin that changes everything. Just imagine being that person. One moment, you're looking at pocket change. The next, you're looking at a six-figure windfall. Wouldn't you at least want to check? So let's talk specifics. What should you look for in a 1968 D penny? First, check the mint mark. If it's a D under the date, you're in the right neighborhood. Next, look closely at the inscriptions. On a double die obverse, the word liberty may appear doubled, and the motto, "In God We Trust," can look like it has a shadow. Even the date itself, 1968, can show doubling. A regular magnifying glass can help. But serious coin hunters use jewelers, loupes, or digital microscopes. Because spotting those subtle differences is the difference between 1 cent and $100,000. But don't stop there. Even if your coin doesn't show doubling, condition matters. If the penny looks sharp, with strong details, minimal scratches, and that original coppery red luster, it could still be valuable. Professional grading services like PCGs or NGC can certify your coin, and a high grade from them can multiply its worth dramatically. And here's the thrilling part. Coins like these aren't just for museums or elite collectors. They're hiding in plain sight in coffee cans, sock drawers, and forgotten piggy banks across America. So I'll ask again, when was the last time you actually looked at your pennies? Because while most of us dismiss them as useless clutter, those who know the secrets see them for what they truly are: lottery tickets minted in copper. Now, let's address the skeptics. Some people say, sure, a few coins sell for crazy prices, but that doesn't mean mine will. and their right short chances are slim. But here's the thing. Opportunities like this don't need high odds to be worth pursuing. If there's even a tiny chance that a coin in your possession could be worth 6 figures, doesn't it make sense to check? After all, it costs nothing but a little time and curiosity, and that's the beauty of this hunt. Unlike the stock market, real estate, or other investments, coin hunting doesn't require huge capital. All it takes is awareness, knowledge, a willingness to look twice at something others ignore. Which brings us to the bigger point. The story of the 1968 D penny isn't just about coins. It's about perspective. It's about finding extraordinary value in the ordinary. It's about realizing that treasures are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to notice, and yes, it's also about the thrill of possibly holding $1 million penny in your hand. So here's the final question I'll leave you with tonight. When you empty your pockets, will you glance at those pennies with indifference? Or will you pick them up, look closely, and wonder if you're holding history worth a fortune? Because the truth is, somewhere out there, right now, another 1968 double die obverse is waiting to be found. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for you. So the next time you feel the urge to toss your pennies aside, remember this: 1 cent could become $100,000. Or more. 1 cent could write a new chapter in your financial story. And 1 cent could remind you that life's most valuable treasures are often the ones we overlook. Don't overlook them. Look closely. Search carefully. And who knows, your next penny could be the one that turns a simple moment into a once-in-a-lifetime miracle. Now, before you dismiss this as just another internet rumor, let me assure you, the 1969 D Lincoln penny is a coin that has stunned collectors, auction houses, and ordinary Americans who never thought a single cent could fund a retirement, pay off a mortgage, or rewrite a family's financial future. This story is not only real, it's still unfolding. And as you'll soon learn, you could be sitting on one right now without even realizing it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. To understand how a 1 cent piece could command hundreds of thousands of dollars, we have to go back to a tumultuous moment in American history, the late 1960s. The year was 1969. The Vietnam War raged overseas. Protests filled the streets. Woodstock set the counterculture ablaze. And in the heart of Denver, the U.S. Mint was churning out billions of pennies stamped with Abraham Lincoln's steady profile. For most people, these coins were nothing more than pocket change. But a small fraction, just a handful, contained something extraordinary. A striking error so dramatic that it transformed a humble penny into a piece of numismatic legend. You see, the 1969 D penny is notorious for its connection to one of the rarest and most valuable error varieties in American coinage, the double die. Imagine looking closely at the words "Liberty" or "In God We Trust" on the coin and seeing them appear doubled, as if the coin itself had a shadow. This wasn't a trick of the light. It was a genuine minting mistake, one that only happened to a tiny, number of coins before the error was caught and corrected. Now, here's where the story turns from fascinating to downright shocking. For years, many of these double die coins went unnoticed. They passed through vending machines, fell between car seats, clinked into piggy banks, and sat forgotten in jars. Ordinary pennies carrying a secret fortune. Then, as collectors began to uncover them, the market exploded. Auction records shattered. One pristine example of the 1969 double die penny minted in Denver, with that little D beneath the day, reportedly sold for nearly $1 million, topping out at $992,000. Yes, you heard that right, $992,000. For a penny. Pause for a moment and let that sink in. Somewhere in America, someone handed over a penny at a gas station, a diner, or a grocery store. And that penny, if saved and authenticated, could have been worth more than a mansion, more than a college education for 3 kids, more than most people's lifetime savings. Now, here's a question. How many of us have absent-mindedly tossed pennies into a change jar? Or brushed them aside because they're not worth anything? What if one of those coins was a 1969 D double die? What if you've already had one slip through your fingers? That little shiver you feel right now, that's the realization that fortune can be hiding in plain sight. But before you run to the nearest coin jar, let's talk specifics. What makes the 1969 D double die penny so special? And how can you tell if you might have one? First, the telltale doubling. On authentic examples, the words liberty and in God we trust show clear. Dramatic doubling letters that almost look like they've been struck twice. This is not the faint, machine-like doubling you sometimes see on ordinary coins. This is bold, unmistakable, almost screaming at you from the surface. Collectors often say that if you have to squint, it's not the real deal. When you see it, you'll know. Second, the D mint mark. Unlike other famous double dies, this one bears the Denver Mint's tiny letter under the date, giving it an extra layer of rarity and intrigue. While the Philadelphia Mint has its share of legendary double dies like the 1955 and the 1972, Denver Variety from 1969 stands in a class of its own, with only a handful ever certified, and third, condition is everything. A heavily circulated 1969 D double die could still fetch tens of thousands of dollars. But in pristine, uncirculated, almost untouched condition, that's where the sky-high values emerge. That's how you get from a few thousand to nearly $1 million. That's where numismatic dreams are made. Now, can almost hear the question forming in your mind. Okay, but what are the chances of actually finding one today? Fair question. And here's the truth, your odds are slim, but not impossible. These coins are out there. They've been pulled from circulation before, tucked away in collections, even rediscovered by families going through old coffee cans of change. Some experts believe that more undiscovered examples are still waiting to surface, hidden in plain sight among billions of ordinary cents. Think about it. Every day, Americans handle pennies without a second thought. pennies from 1969 are still in circulation over 50 years later. Somewhere in the shuffle, a double-die specimen could be passed along like any other coinless. Of course, someone like you knows what to look for, and that's the power of knowledge. For some, this story is just trivia. But for those who pay attention, it's an opportunity. One coin, one discovery, could flip the script on your financial future. Imagine the thrill of realizing that a coin sitting quietly in your drawer isn't worth 1 cent, it's worth $100,000 or more. Imagine the surge of adrenaline when you hold that tiny piece of copper and know you've struck gold. But let's be honest, this isn't just about money. It's about the thrill of the hunt. It's about uncovering hidden history. Each 1969 D double die is a time capsule. A survivor from a turbulent era, a symbol of how imperfection can create unimaginable value. In a way, it's a reminder that even in times of chaos, extraordinary things can emerge. Still, we can't ignore the practical side. Suppose you find one. What next? The first step is authentication. Sadly, counterfeits exist, and many hopeful collectors have been burned. That's why experts stress the importance of having any suspected double-die penny professionally graded by a trusted service like PCGS or NGC. These institutions not only verify authenticity but also assign the all-important condition grade that determines market value. And let me tell you, the market is hungry. Wealthy collectors, investors, and institutions are constantly on the lookout for these coins. When one appears at auction, bidding wars erupt. It's not just coin nerds competing. It's millionaires who see rare pennies as tangible assets, hedges against uncertainty, and pieces of American history worth fighting for. So here's the dramatic truth. If you own a 1969 D double die penny in high grade, you don't just have a coin. You have leverage. You have a ticket into an exclusive marketplace where fortunes trade hands in the blink of an eye. Now, let me ask you, what would you do if you found one? Would you sell immediately, cashing out for life-changing money? Or would you hold it, waiting for the value to climb even higher? It's not a hypothetical question. People have faced that exact decision. And some have walked away with life-changing checks that started with nothing more than a glance at a penny. Here's the kicker. The window of opportunity is closing. Every year, more of these coins are discovered, authenticated, and locked away in permanent collections. Once they're gone, they're gone. The chances of finding one in the wild diminish with each passing day. That's why now, more than ever, is the time to look. Not tomorrow, not next week, today, because the next $1 million penny could be sitting in your hand right now. And you don't even know it. So the next time you dismiss a penny, stop yourself. Take a second look. Check the date. Look for that D. And if you see those doubled letters staring back at you, don't shrug it off. You might just be holding the rarest, most valuable coin of your life. And let me leave you with this thought. History isn't just written in textbooks or carved into monuments. Sometimes it jingles quietly in our pockets, waiting for someone curious enough, daring enough, to notice. The 1969 D-double die penny is proof that fortune favors the observant. The question is, are you paying attention? Because the next time you reach for spare change, the difference between a penny and a fortune could be nothing more than the sharpness of your eye and the courage to believe that the impossible is possible. It's just a penny. How valuable could it really be? Let me assure you, this isn't hype. This is history, economics, and a little bit of luck colliding in a single coin that continues to captivate treasure hunters across the United States. And today, we're going to unravel the mystery of the 1970 D Lincoln penny, why collectors are chasing it, and how an ordinary cent minted more than 50 years ago can potentially be worth millions. But first, let me ask you a question. When was the last time you actually looked at your pocket change? Not just glanced at it, but studied it. The mint mark, the little details most people ignore. If your answer is not in years, you might want to pay closer attention. Because the truth is, the difference between an ordinary coin and a fortune could come down to one tiny mark, one subtle error, or one overlooked variation. Let's start at the beginning. The year was 1970. Richard Nixon was president. America was entrenched in the Vietnam War, and the Apollo 13 mission had just given the world the phrase, "Houston, we have a problem." Amid this backdrop of turbulence and triumph, the U.S. Mint was doing what it always did, producing billions of coins for circulation. Among them was the Lincoln cent, the classic copper penny featuring the profile of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse dot. Now, 1970 itself isn't particularly rare in the world of pennies. Both the Philadelphia and Denver mints produced hundreds of millions of them. But buried within this sea of copper were a handful of mistakes, anomalies, and rare variations that would become the stuff of numismatic legend. And this is where things get fascinating. The Denver Mint, marked with that tiny D under the date, accidentally struck certain coins with errors that collectors would later identify as doubling. Imagine stamping a design twice on the same surface, slightly misaligned. The result? A Lincoln penny with doubled letters and numbers, most famously in the date and the word liberty. To the untrained eye, it might look like a blurry print. But to a collector, it's like spotting buried treasure. And here's where the story turns dramatic. In the high-stakes world of coin auctions, these 1970 D doubled die obverse cents started commanding prices that seemed outrageous for a penny. But as rarity met demand, the numbers climbed higher and higher. Reports emerged of top-condition examples, coins graded at the very highest levels of preservation, selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. In one jaw-dropping instance, pristine specimen was reported to have changed hands for an astonishing $985,000, nearly $1 million, for a penny. Now pause for a moment and let that sink in. How many pennies have passed through your hands in your lifetime? Hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions. And yet, what if just one of them held a secret capable of paying off your mortgage, sending your kids to college, or funding the retirement you've always dreamed about. That's the electrifying power of stories like the 1970 cent. They remind us that wealth doesn't always hide in the stock market or a 401k. Sometimes it jingles quietly in your pocket. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. What exactly makes this coin so valuable? It isn't just age. Millions of old coins aren't worth more than face value. The real driver is rarity combined with condition. When an error occurs at the mint, only a handful of coins slip through. Most get caught and destroyed. Those that survive become rare anomalies, and when collectors compete for them, the sky's the limit on price, and then there's the grading system. Coins are professionally evaluated by experts who assign a numerical grade between 1 and 70. A grade of 70 represents perfection, flawless under magnification. The closer to perfection, the higher the value. So while a circulated 1970 penny might fetch a few $100s if it has the doubling, an uncirculated mint-condition example can rocket into the hundreds of thousands or beyond. That's the difference between loose change and a life-changing windfall. Still skeptical? Let's put this into perspective. Imagine standing in an auction house, the air charged with anticipation. The auctioneer calls out a 1970 double die obverse sent in near-perfect condition. Bidding starts at $50,000. Hands shoot up. The price climbs $100,000. $200,000, $500,000. The crowd gasps as it pushes past $750,000. And then, in a climactic moment, the gavel falls. Sold for just under $1 million. That's not a fairy tale. That's the electrifying reality of the rare coin market. So how do you know if you've got one of these treasures? This is where most people miss out. They never bother to check. But you, now armed with this knowledge, can become a detective. The first step, examine the date. Look closely at the 1970. If you see shadowing, a ghostly second image, or obvious doubling in the numbers or the word liberty, you might be holding something extraordinary. And here's a little insider tip. Use a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. Even a cheap one from Amazon can make the difference between spotting $1 million coin, doubling, and dismissing it as an ordinary coin. Some variations are dramatic. The doubling leaps out at you. Others are subtle, requiring a trained eye. But once you see it, you'll never forget it. Now, you might be wondering, okay, so I find a 1970 penny that looks doubled. Then what? Here's where the journey gets exciting. You'll want to have it authenticated and graded by a trusted service like PCGS or GEES. These companies are the gold standard in numismatics. They'll confirm whether your coin is the real deal and assign it a grade that could make all the difference in its market value. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Every day that coin sits in circulation, rattling around in a drawer or a jar, its condition worsens. Tiny scratches, discoloration, even fingerprints can lower its grade. And in this game, condition is everything. So if you suspect you've got a rare penny, don't wait. The longer you hesitate, the more money you could be losing. This brings us to a sobering thought. How many people have unknowingly spent a fortune at the grocery store, slid a treasure across the counter at a gas station, or tossed a life-changing coin into a Coinstar machine without ever realizing it? It's enough to make you look at every penny differently, isn't it? And here's a twist that will really keep you on your toes. While the 1970D double die is one of the most famous, it isn't the only valuable Lincoln cent. Variations from 1955, 1969S, 1983, and even 1995 have commanded thousands of dollars. That means the opportunity isn't limited to 1 year or one mint mark. The rare coin market is full of surprises waiting to be discovered, but make no mistake, the 1970D is one of the crown jewels. And stories of its value have fueled a modern-day treasure hunt unlike any other. People across the country are rifling through change jars, scouring bankrolls, and combing flea markets in search of that elusive double die cent. Some will walk away empty-handed. Others will score modest wins, $50 here, $200 there. But a lucky few will strike gold, and their lives will never be the same. And that brings us to the heart of this story. It isn't just about a coin. It's about possibility. It's about the thrill of discovery, the rush of knowing that something extraordinary could be hiding in plain sight. It's about realizing that wealth isn't always locked away in institutions or reserved for the elite. Sometimes it's right there in your hand. If only you're willing to look closely enough, so the next time you hear that jingle of coins in your pocket, pause for a moment. What if one of them isn't just a penny? What if it's your ticket to financial freedom? What if the fortune you've been chasing is already in your possession? That's the suspenseful reality of the 1970D Lincoln cent. And here's the final cliffhanger. They're still out there. Somewhere in circulation, tucked away in a forgotten piggy bank, sealed inside a dusty roll at the back of a bank vault. These rare pennies continue to hide in plain sight. Will you be the one to find one? Or will you let the opportunity slip by, like so many others who never bothered to look? The choice is yours. But remember this, fortunes have been made from smaller discoveries. And when the next 1970D cent surfaces and sells for hundreds of thousands, or perhaps even breaks that $1 million threshold, you'll either be the person nodding in awe, or the one kicking yourself, wondering what might have been sitting right in your change jar all along. So go ahead, check your pennies, study them, and maybe, just maybe, the next headline about a penny worth nearly $1 million will be about you. Let me take you on a journey. Imagine this. You're holding a penny in your hand. It's coppery, worn, ordinary, or so it seems. You toss it into a change jar without a thought, the same way you've done 1,000 times before. But what if I told you that very coin could be worth not just a few cents, not even a few $100s, but hundreds of thousands, even millions? Suddenly, that little 1-cent piece doesn't feel so ordinary anymore, does it? In the world of coin collecting, the smallest details can change everything. And among these details the story of the 2004 no mint mark. Lincoln penny has captured the imagination of collectors and everyday people alike. At first glance, it looks just like any other penny from your pocket change. But the truth is, a rare handful of these coins have stunned the market with reported sales reaching as high as $9,164,000 in pristine condition. Yes, you heard that right, nearly $1 million for a single 1-cent coin. So, how did an everyday penny transform into a life-changing treasure? To understand, we need to dive into the fascinating world of mint marks, errors, and collector demand. But be warned, once you hear this story, you'll never look at your loose change the same way again. The mint mark is that tiny little letter on your coin, usually a D for Denver or an S for San Francisco. For most of us, it's just a background detail. But in the realm of numismatics, it's everything. It tells you where the coin was struck, and it often determines rarity. Now, the 2004 Lincoln cent was supposed to bear a mint mark unless struck at Philadelphia, which traditionally leaves its coins without one. That's where the mystery deepens. Some of these so-called no mint mark 2004 Lincoln cents are not just ordinary Philadelphia issues. They are striking anomalies, coins that don't fit the usual patterns. And that's exactly what sends collectors into a frenzy. But here's the kicker. It's not just about the missing letter. Condition is king. A penny with scratches, dings, or discoloration. That won't fetch much. But a 2004 no mint mark Lincoln cent in flawless, uncirculated condition, the kind that looks like it was frozen in time, can rocket in value. We're talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and in rare cases, close to $1 million. Suddenly, those old coin jars and forgotten piggy banks don't seem so boring anymore, do they? Now, let's pause for a second. Think about how many pennies have passed through your hands in your lifetime. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Maybe more. What are the chances that somewhere in all that pocket change, one of these rare treasures slipped by unnoticed? The thought alone sends a shiver down your spine. It's like walking past a winning lottery ticket every day without ever realizing it. But why would anyone pay such astronomical sums for what looks like an ordinary coin? The answer lies in a mix of rarity, history, and obsession. Coin collectors, serious ones, are not just hobbyists, they're hunters. They thrive on finding that one piece that nobody else has, the coin that completes a set or tells a story. The 2004 no mint mark Lincoln cent isn't just a coin. It's a symbol of mystery, a question mark in American minting history. And when a mystery collides with scarcity, Vazia can climb into the stratosphere. Of course, the coin world has its share of exaggeration, rumors, and hype. You've probably heard someone say that penny in your pocket could be worth millions. Usually, it's not true. But in this case, it's not just hype. There are verified auction records, shocking sales, and real collectors willing to open their wallets to chase this elusive prize. One coin, sold under pristine conditions, is reported to have commanded close to $1 million. That's the power of numismatic gold, or in this case, copper. Still skeptical? That's understandable. After all, it feels almost unbelievable. But consider this. Throughout history, some of the most valuable coins have been the ones most people dismissed as ordinary. The 1943 copper penny, struck during World War II when the mint was using steel instead of copper. The 1955 doubled die penny with its dramatic doubling of the date. Coins that once rattled around in lunch money transactions are now museum-worthy treasures. Why should the 2004 no-mint mark Lincoln be any different? Let's raise the stakes a little higher. Imagine you're sorting through your change. You spot a 2004 penny. You lean closer. No mint mark. Your heart races. You start wondering, could this be the one? The idea alone is enough to spark a frenzy. And if you think it sounds crazy, consider this. Countless people have found rare coins by sheer accident at garage sales, in old jars, even while counting tips at a diner. Overnight, their lives changed. And here's where fear creeps in. How many times have you overlooked a coin, tossed it into a machine, or given it away in change without checking? Could you have unknowingly let a small fortune slip right through your fingers? That's the haunting thought that keeps collectors digging deeper. The fear of missing out, the possibility that treasure was within reach but overlooked is almost unbearable. And that's exactly why people keep hunting. Now, let's shift gears. Say you do find one of these 2004 no-mint mark pennies. What next? The first step is verification. Not every no-mint mark penny is valuable. Most are just ordinary Philadelphia strikes. You'll want to have the coin authenticated and graded by a professional service like PCGS or NGC. This is where condition and rarity are scientifically measured. A grade of MS65 or higher can multiply the value astronomically. Think of grading like a report card for your coin, and the difference between a B and an A could be the difference between a few $100s and a life-changing payday. But here's where the story takes a dramatic twist. Not every coin makes it through the grading process with flying colors. Many hopefuls discover their penny isn't the rare variety after all, or it's too worn down to matter. It's heartbreaking, yes, but the possibility of hitting that jackpot coin keeps the dream alive. And that's what fuels this market. The thrill of the hunt, the tiny chance of glory, the fantasy that one coin, sitting unnoticed in your pocket, could flip your entire financial future upside down. And let's be honest, who doesn't love the idea of turning something as small as a penny into a house, a retirement fund, or generational wealth? It almost feels like alchemy. But unlike fairy tales, this one is rooted in reality. The sales are real. The market is real. The life-changing money is real. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you really looked at your change? Not just glanced at it, but studied it. How many coins do you carry around every day without giving them a second thought? And what if, just what if, one of them was your golden ticket? As we come to the climax of this story, let me leave you with one final thought. Every coin has a story. Some are stories of war and sacrifice, some of mistakes and accidents, some of artistry and design. The 2004 No Mint Mark Lincoln Cent tells a story of possibility, of how something ordinary can hide extraordinary value. And the only question left is, will you take the time to look? Because here's the truth, every day that passes is another day someone else could find that coin. Someone else could cash in. Someone else could change their life. Do you really want to take that chance? Or will you start hunting today, knowing that somewhere, hidden among billions of pennies, there just might be one that carries your fortune? The choice, as always, is yours. But remember this, fortunes have been made from coins that looked like nothing. And one day soon, someone is going to find another 2004 No Mint Mark penny worth a staggering sum. The only question is, will it be you? So the next time you hear that familiar clink of change, don't dismiss it. That sound might just be the music of opportunity knocking. And if you're lucky, very lucky, it could be the sound of your future, hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to discover it.